Stress, anxiety, and arousal are all different factors that can affect someone's performance in both positive and negative ways. For example, in these two scenarios about the number 2 college badminton seed Nick and the netball goal shooter Sarah display the way these factors can affect performance. Stress is a pattern of negative physiological states and psychological responses occurring in situations where people perceive threats to their well-being, which they may be unable to meet, and can also be defined as generally being discussed in relation to an imbalance between demands of a situation encountered by an individual and the perceived ability to cope or adjust to these demands. In the first scenario, Nick has been struggling to play well all season, and his coach reassures him he's good and tells him how well he needs to play for the college. During games, he feels nauseous and can't apply tactics done in practice, causing his performance to fall apart. Nick is feeling stressed, and this is one of the causes of his drop in performance levels. Nick is stressed because he is reacting to the situation he is in and the demands placed on him, which are to play well and have a chance of winning, and this is causing him to display symptoms of stress, which are affecting his performance. There are 3 different types of symptoms of stress, which are somatic, cognitive, and behavioural. Somatic is the physiological body's response to stress via the ANS system, and this includes increases in heart rate, breathing rate, adrenaline, and dilated pupils. A cognitive symptom to stress is a psychological response to stress, and it is how the mind can affect someone's performance if they are under stress. This can include reduced concentration, loss in interest, and being unable to relax and worrying. The last type of stress symptom is behavioural, and this is where someone's behaviour in their day-to-day life changes if they are stressed. This could be an increase in habits such as smoking, fidgeting, being more clumsy, and poor personal presentation. Nick has both somatic and cognitive symptoms of stress. For example, he is feeling nauseous, and this is a somatic symptom of stress because it is an example of stress affecting the body, and it can lead to a decrease in his ability to play well. Another symptom of stress is that he is struggling to make precise and accurate shots. This is an example of cognitive stress because he is less focused on what he is doing, so he's making more mistakes in his performance. As Nick's stress is causing his performance to fall apart, it is called distress rather than eustress. These 2 different types of stress refer to whether it is good or bad. Distress is bad stress because it is an extreme form of worrying as a result of a perceived inability to meet demands and is not beneficial to performance. As Nick has this, it is causing him to not play well and his performance levels to decrease. The second type of stress is eustress, and this is when stress is beneficial to performance, as it is a healthy amount of stress causing a positive reaction from the performer. This diagram here is the process of stress. It always starts with the demand of a task, which in Nick's case is the demand to play well in his badminton tournaments and try to win. How someone perceives the demand of the task will determine whether they experience good or bad stress. Nick's perception of the demand is as a threat, causing him to feel distress rather than eustress, which leads to the outcome of a decrease in performance and he doesn't play very well. In Sarah's scenario, she is also experiencing stress because she is having a drop in her performance levels. Like Nick, this is because she perceives the demand of the task, which is to score a goal by shooting the ball into the hoop, as a threat. This is causing her to experience distress rather than eustress, which is why she only has a scoring rate average of 32% a game. However, her teammate Rachel is playing well in the game, and this is because she perceives the demand of the game positively as a challenge rather than a threat, causing her to have eustress rather than distress. This increases her energy and motivation, so her performance is increased and she is receiving player of the game often. One reason why Sarah may feel stressed is because she is feeling under pressure because there are many people watching the game. This stressor is called the sports environment because the audience is making her feel more stressed. Also, because the games are at the end of the season, they may be more important games, which puts more pressure on Sarah because she feels like she needs to play really well to help her team win the game, causing her to become more stressed. Furthermore, because other teammates aren't being supportive of her because she isn't playing as well, it causes personal pressure because she wants to avoid social disapproval and wants her teammates to respect her. Anxiety is another reason why someone's performance levels may drop. It is a negative state of worry, apprehension, or tension that often occurs in the absence of real or obvious danger. Typically, the tension felt by anxious individuals is accompanied by a heightened state of physiological arousal. In the second scenario, Sarah is probably suffering from anxiety in her game situation, which is leading her to fail in her score and average. A reason why Sarah may be suffering from anxiety is because she is negatively responding to the stress placed upon her and sees her game situation as a threat which she may doubt her ability to cope with it. There are two types of anxiety, which are cognitive and somatic. Cognitive anxiety is the psychological part of anxiety and the amount someone worries in the head. This is likely to lead to emotional feelings of worry and apprehension, as well as negative thoughts. Sarah is likely to have cognitive anxiety because it is often brought on by stress, and to improve her performance, she would need to reduce this by using self-talk methods to remove the negative thoughts and to improve her chance of success. Somatic anxiety is the physiological side of anxiety and is the effect a situation has on someone's body. For example, an increased heart rate, breathing rate, and other similar symptoms doing the same as when there is an increased arousal. When Sarah is about to shoot, if she has cognitive anxiety where she is doubting her ability to score well, she will probably also have somatic anxiety because somatic anxiety is triggered by cognitive anxiety. Other changes that could physiologically take place are an increase in muscle tension. This has also decreased her chance of scoring because she would be less accurate and precise as she would be without these symptoms of anxiety. Competitive anxiety is common in athletes as it is an anxiety that is specific to sporting situations such as Sarah's and Nick's. This is when an athlete or performer perceives their competitive sporting situation as a threat, and they may feel both cognitive and somatic symptoms of anxiety while performing. In Sarah's scenario, it is likely that she has state anxiety as opposed to trait anxiety. State anxiety is a temporary change in feeling of being anxious that changes within different situations. For example, Sarah may not feel anxious in her everyday life, however, when she is competing, she does feel anxious, and this is state anxiety because it is how she is feeling in that moment of time. However, in Nick's scenario, it says that he is also feeling anxious with schoolwork as well as when he's playing badminton, which suggests that he suffers from trait anxiety. A trait is something that someone has in all situations and is stable over time. So trait anxiety is when someone feels anxious in most situations rather than just in that moment feeling. This can increase Nick's anxiety because in a stressful situation, because as well as trait anxiety, he is also responding to stress with state anxiety. There are many different factors that could affect someone's anxiety, and they can be split into two categories: before and during the competition. Before competition, Sarah may feel anxious because she is worried that she'll perform badly and worried that she will fail her team. This is causing her to be anxious because she feels pressured to play well, but doubts that she can meet the demands placed upon her. Another factor causing her to be anxious could be because of the importance of the games. Her crunch games are always scheduled for the end of the season, so are likely to be very important, which will increase her stress levels because she needs to play well and needs higher levels of anxiety. During the games, Sarah may feel anxious because of people watching her. During her games, it says that there are often many spectators watching, and this could increase her anxiety. Also, some of her teammates, such as Rachel, aren't supportive of her, and she knows about their attitude towards her. This interaction with others could make Sarah feel upset and feel pressured to perform well, and could be another reason for her increased anxiety levels. During games and matches, a high level of arousal is normally arousing the players. Arousal is a blend of physiological and psychological activity in a person, and it refers to the level of motivation, alertness, and excitement at a particular moment. In Nick's scenario, he would be feeling aroused during his matches because he is ready to perform and his body prepares him for action. Different people have optimum levels of arousal to achieve their best performance, and as Nick isn't performing well, this may be because he has either too high or too low levels of arousal. If someone's arousal levels are too low, then their performance may not be good because they are bored or they don't have as much interest in what they are doing. However, if their levels are too high, then they may become stressed, causing anxiety and then fear or panic. Optimal levels of arousal will cause a person to be excited and perform the best. However, this differs for different people in different sports. For badminton, a higher level of arousal is needed compared to a sport like darts because it is very energetic, and however, Nick doesn't have optimum levels of arousal, and this is causing him to become stressed and not play as well as he could. There are four main theories to arousal, which are the drive theory, inverted U theory, catastrophe theory, and eyes-off theory. The drive theory was by Hall in 1951, and this states that as arousal levels increase, so does the level of performance in a linear relationship. For example, the higher Nick's arousal is, the better he will perform in badminton. The same with Sarah in netball, and if someone has low levels of arousal, then they won't perform as well. This theory was developed in 1965, which suggests that the presence of others increases arousal, and it also brings out the dominant response, which is the most likely way that the performer is to perform a skill or task. For example, Nick never seems to apply tactics in a game situation, which would be because he has a lot of arousal, so reverts back to his dominant response, which is to be not using tactics and to play without a game plan, which causes his performance levels to drop. Similarly, Sarah may not be shooting as well under a lot of pressure because she is aroused, so doesn't use the proper technique when shooting, as she has learned. This theory is true for experienced performers who have played for a long time and have a good dominant response, as even as their arousal levels increase, they will continue to play well. It was also true for gross motor skills because there isn't a lot of precision needed, so high levels of arousal are useful. However, there have been some criticisms of this theory because less experienced players, such as Nick and Sarah, may not have the correct dominant skill, so when they are highly aroused, they will start to play badly again. It also assumes that low arousal levels mean that someone performs badly. However, in some sports, this is a good thing because a player may need to be very focused, meaning that they need low levels of arousal. For example, when Sarah is shooting, she needs to be very accurate, and high levels of arousal could mean that she is more likely to miss. Another theory is the inverted U theory, which suggests that arousal increases, so does performance, up to a certain point where it reaches optimal levels, where performance then starts to gradually decline as arousal continues to increase. For example, Nick will have a certain point where his arousal level means he performs best, and if he is either over or under aroused, he won't perform as well, which is what is happening to him. This theory states that optimal levels of arousal can differ due to the type of task which is being carried out. For example, badminton uses gross motor skills because it is a simple sport, so Nick would need higher levels of arousal, whereas shooting a ball in netball is a fine motor skill because Sarah needs to be very precise, and this would mean that she needs lower levels of arousal. It is also affected by the task complexity, the performer's skill levels, and the type of personality someone has. For example, an introvert may need not as much as arousal, whereas the extrovert would be better with the higher levels of arousal. Some criticism to this theory is that not all drops in performance are gradual. For example, when Nick makes an error, it says his performance falls apart rather than gradually decreasing. Also, it doesn't explain how some optimal levels may occur later and not just at the midpoint of the curve. Another theory is the catastrophe theory, which suggests that performance may not gradually decrease as suggested in the inverted U theory, but can rapidly deteriorate. This graph shows how, after a certain point, the performance in someone rapidly decreases rather than gradually. This theory also says how when cognitive anxiety is low and somatic anxiety is high, then performance follows the inverted U theory. However, when both cognitive and somatic anxiety are high, then there will be a dramatic decline after a certain point, and there will be a catastrophe within performance. For example, during Nick's match, his performance falls apart because he has both high and cognitive somatic anxiety, causing him to have a catastrophe within his performance. When this catastrophe does occur, then small reductions in someone's arousal won't be enough to bring performance back to its previous level, so it will take a while for Nick to improve his performance back to how it should be. For this to happen, he would need to bring his arousal levels back to how they were before the catastrophe occurred, which would be hard because a drop in his performance could make him even more stressed than he was before. The last theory is the eyes off theory, which is the individual zones of optimal functioning. This theory believes that individual differences occur in all athletes and the way they respond to anxiety is different and that everyone has optimal levels of arousal. This table shows how different athletes perform best in different levels of arousal and that optimal levels of arousal are a bandwidth rather than a threshold, like in the inverted U and catastrophe theory. For example, in Sarah's scenario, she isn't playing well in the high-pressured environment, which suggests that she would have a low eyes off like athlete 1. However, her teammate Rachel is performing better in the pressured environment, suggesting that she has a higher eyes off level, and she performs better when she is highly aroused, more like athlete 3 than athlete 1 as Sarah is. There are different things which could affect someone's eyes off levels, for example, personality. An introvert has a lower eyes off level than an extrovert, suggesting that Sarah and Nick are more extroverted than Rachel. Also, it can be affected by the task type, such as whether it is a simple or complex skill. Another thing that could affect someone's eyes off levels are the stage of learning that they are at and how experienced they are at their sport. For a beginner or novice performer, they would work better at lower levels of arousal, whereas if they are an experienced performer, then they would work better at higher levels of arousal. When Nick and Sarah continue playing sport and become more experienced, they may perform better with higher levels of arousal in their game situations because they are more confident in their sports. There have been many strategies for performers to try to control their stress, anxiety, and arousal levels. The first thing that Nick and Sarah's coaches would need to do is to identify whether they are either anxious or stressed, and this is why they are performing badly. Some ways to control somatic, which is physiological anxiety, is to use breathing techniques as a way to calm you down and cause you to be more relaxed. Another way is to use centering, which is where breathing is used to focus concentration on the task rather than the cause of anxiety, so the performer is more focused. For example, when Sarah is about to shoot, she should try to take some deep breaths and focus all her attention on the ball to increase her chances of it going in. For Nick, it would also be useful just before he starts his game because he needs to focus on what he's doing. There are also strategies to control cognitive, which is psychological anxiety. One of these is to use imagery. Both Nick and Sarah should visualize making successful shots and performing well to calm their anxiety. They could also use stopping, which is where they avoid thinking of any negative thoughts about their performance and instead use positive self-talk to boost their confidence in what they are doing so they don't feel as nervous and don't feel as if they're going to fail.